Okay, thanks very much. Little bit about myself, then we'll get into the subject matter. Obviously, I'm Jeff Evans. I'm a probation officer by training. In the 70s, trained as a probation officer. For the last 30 years, I've worked with children, adults, families, and professionals around autism. My expertise is not around Fragile X, though I have worked with lots of children, particularly in the late 70s, early 80s, that were in schools for children with autism. My expertise is around behaviour, and behaviour which is seen as a challenge. What I want to do is quickly explore some of these ideas. How far we get, I'm not quite sure. It depends on what mood I'm in once we get going. But we'll see how far we get. What I want to say right at the beginning, you take what you want and leave what you don't want. What I talk about does not work for every single child with Fragile X, autism or any other condition, because they're totally individual. And it doesn't work consistently for every child, because just like us, they have different kinds of days. They have days when things work and days when things don't. They have days when you can get it right and days when you can't get it right. And it's because of that that I say take what you want and leave the rest for another day. You will be able to get the handouts, because I'm not going to go through every slide and talk you through them. It's not my style. They're there to read. Most of them are self-explanatory. I believe in having a holistic approach to behaviour which challenges. So often, when we look at behaviour, what we do, we look at the problem and difficulty that is presenting at that moment, and we become preoccupied with that problem, with that difficulty. And we solve that difficulty and we just sit around waiting for the next one to come along. What is needed is an holistic approach that throughout the child's life, throughout the adult's life, we are putting in strategies, we are putting in approaches that make those difficult moments less, but also make them easier to manage if we've got a bit of luck and things are working for us as well. So it's this holistic approach, and there are some of the components of that I'm going to explore with you. Where we start is different to what you might be used to. Very often when I speak at conferences, I want to start with a child. We have this thing that everything's child-centred. I don't believe that, and I'll probably explain that as we go on. I believe we have to be centred around ourselves, the family, and the child within that context, in order to support the child appropriately and the adult appropriately. So we start when looking at behaviour with looking at ourselves. Whenever behaviour has to be changed, by the very nature of it, someone has to change. Who is more likely to change? Your child or you? You, with a bit of luck. Though some of us are as rigid as the children we have and work with. We don't like change. Let's explore that. But we have to change. So therefore we begin by looking at ourselves and saying, look, if I can change, if I can do things differently, maybe my child can change along with me. And so we start by saying, look, we all have behaviour that challenges at times. How many of you have challenging behaviour sometimes? It's great with parents because there's always partners there, or very often, or people who know you, so you can't lie. And how many of you have challenging behaviour then? Come on, be honest. How many wake up in a mood and you take it out on the person in the bed next to you, or you take it out on the kids? Yeah. You want to hit the boss, but you don't, so other people suffer that week because of that. We have behaviour. You get quite close to challenging behaviour. Do you ever feel like strangling your partner? And oh yeah, what's that? That was said with feeling. Yeah. And sometimes you do, don't you? You get there and you stop. And you feel like swear. I shan't swear because I've noticed this children are. But you feel like swearing at the people around you and the boss, but you stop. The difference is between you and the children who really, really challenge is you have the thoughts, you have the drive a little bit, but you stop short of the action, hopefully. Why do you stop short? A number of factors in that. Because of your understanding of the other person. Because of your theory of mind, and if you want to look these things up, Baron Cohen, Sweat and the Root of Faith are the people to look up about. You have this understanding of how your behaviour impacts upon that person. In other words, if I strangle, by the way, is the person videoing me? Someone said they were going to video. Are you videoing me?
Yes.
Right. The reason I ask that is if it goes on YouTube and I say anything about my partner, there will be challenging behaviour when I get home. So I've got to be careful. And then you sit back, you know, son, what stops you? Because you love them. Because you understand the impact of your behaviour upon them, their quality of life. And also, you also look back and think, if I do that, then this will happen to me. And it's an understanding of the consequences and the impact that stops your thoughts becoming actions. Very often with children with autism and learning disabilities, that understanding of my impact upon other people is not there, or has to be taught. Also, consequences. Yeah, I'd love to kick the boss, but I'll lose my job, and therefore I won't have an income. You understand that. I worked with a young man years ago, and it's hard to tell now with a belly and things, but I was a climbing instructor, or still am technically, and we were taking this young man out, about climbing, and a staff member noticed that he was putting a pair of scissors into his rucksack, and they said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to cut Jeff Evans's rope." And because he's a very severe man, what he meant by being a very severe man is I put in restrictions on his behaviour, I put in parameters around his behaviour, and so he saw me as being strict. And the staff member said, "No, you don't really want to do that." He said, "I do." And she says, "Look, if you do, the consequences are this." And she said, "Look, you'll go to prison if you kill him." And she listed all the things that were important to him, that he'd lose. And she said, "There's no more Frank Sinatra. There's no mulligatawny soup." May not be something you missed, but it was for him. And she listed them all, and he looked at her for a long time and said, "Thank you very much for telling me, but I think it'd be worth it." And at that moment, you know, you grab the scissors, don't you? You see, he knew the consequences. But knowing the consequences, where some people with learning disabilities often find, does not mean they don't want to engage in the behaviour. It does for us very often. Also, we don't do things because of what the peers think. What will I do if everybody gets to know what I'm like? And so we worry about what other people think. A lot of people I work with don't give a damn about what other people think about themselves, so that is not a controller for their behaviour. And we start with this and saying, look, we've the potential for challenging behaviour. We've got some things working for us that stops that potential becoming action. And therefore, the other thing I want to go over right at the beginning is this. If we understand that we've got the potential, we understand that we are very close to the people we're working with in potential for behaviour, or to the people we're living with. Why is that important? When you look at all the cases that are coming through, where people with learning disabilities, autism, are being misused and abused, it's because people have stopped seeing that person, Winterbourne for example, as being like them. They have stopped identifying with that person. They see the person with disability as being different, and therefore if you are different, it's okay to do different things to you. Does that make sense? And therefore it's important that we say we're not that different. We function differently sometimes, but we have still got that common humanity. And therefore, how I want to be treated, and given that I have behaviour with the potential for challenge, is the way I should work with others. Hope that makes sense.